Hi, Jean.
Hi, Sue. So good to be together again.
Absolutely. And in a very different frame this time.
Mm, yeah.
So we did a recording about a week or so ago of a conversation that we had, which finished with I think, a profound and intense coaching interaction, which we have often had in the times we've had together.
Oh,
And it was part of a much longer conversation. We recognized that perhaps the part that would be most interesting to unpack for people listening to this
wow.
is that kind of coaching. It's all coaching, but that particular bit, which was 15 minutes at the end.
Right. Yeah, it was, I thought, in a way, a surprise is like you said, okay, how do we end? And this is what we ended with, right? So, um,
Yes,
kind of characteristic of how we do what we do.
absolutely. I think, yes. So this part, this introduction is really to help those of you watching to think about how you pay attention to this, how you watch this with us.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for modeling, and hopefully, people will be able to use their NLP skills and stop and start and go really dig into um, the actual video, but then our reflections on the video or the meta comments that we make, I think will be really useful. I'm
Yes.
just thinking for myself when I started NLP, which seems like eons ago, having this kind of stuff that I could go back to was much more difficult at the time.
Yes.
And increasingly with video access is much easier to model because you can actually stop it and
Yeah.
focus on it, go deep with it. So
No,
hopefully people do that.
I think it's remarkable. I think whereas perhaps people thought that being in lockdown and confinement was going to limit things, in fact, I think it's opened up many opportunities for
Oh yeah,
kind of
yeah,
work, particularly.
exactly.
Okay, then.
Why are you holding the silence? Um, yeah.
Thank you, because I think I learned. Well, I don't think I learned it from you. I'm not sure I have your record for holding it. It's not like that, really, but nevertheless.
Yeah, I think you probably do. Yeah.
How shall we? That ping might be a signal. So how shall we close?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes, that's a very good question. So let me ask you, Sue, um, where are you with regard to the choice to not let fear rule?
I believe I'm really in a very good place in relation to that. There are elements from time to time, but I think by and large, so there's still a bit.
Well, let's go to the bit.
I think of my age more than I ever used to.
Right.
And think, and then when I do that, sometimes I think about, well, what might happen, at this age. And yes, I'm as physically fit as probably I've ever been in my life, I think, pretty well. So I catch myself when I do that. And that's a place of just noticing. I wouldn't say, I don't know if it's fear or not really. But yeah, that's the area that's incongruent in relation to that.
So what is it you need to do to make it congruent?
When I am congruent, I'm totally present. And appreciating where I am and what I have. So in those times when I'm not, I'm kind of thinking about what could happen, and I go future and what could happen in the future. So I change tense, change my attention in terms of time. I pay attention to a number that I am, rather than just how I am.
Can you, now's the time to do that. Just pause it.
Yep.
Great. So now we can reflect on that little short segment of the 16-minute video.
And we're still recording.
Yep. And just to contextualize it, that, as you said, Sue, this was part of a much larger conversation that we're having. And you said, how do we end? And I had previously said that I had had this experience where I made a very strong conclusion that I would not let fear rule me. And so that was part of the context for asking you, where are you with regard to your choice to not let fear rule? Yes. And so that relates to our process of identification, that if I've made that decision, then I'm assuming or presupposing that that's within you. It may not be fully articulated, it may not be activated yet, but it's there. And so that was the confidence with which I could ask that question.
And that's very much a characteristic pattern that we follow, isn't it? It's like we apply to self and then apply to the other. Or,
Right.
Either way, we do that. We take what we're exploring and each take it on for ourselves in some way, either with the other's prompting or independently. Mm-hmm. And you were saying that it's part of a bigger conversation. Of course, it's part of a 30-year plus relationship as well, so we have learned a lot about how to be with each other, how to coach, and how to be coached as well in that time.
I think it's a very important point as an overview point for the entire video, 16-minute video, that our relationship is a significant factor in the actual interactions. There's some points during it where I just go, I can take a shortcut here because relationally, you've indicated you're saying yes to going there, even though there's some kind of qualifications. You're saying yes, and so what it speaks to is rapport, yes. And that doing this kind of work, that the level of rapport is not a technique, but it's part of the way of being together in order to bring that kind of change and transformation.
Yeah. And just commenting on the specifics of that bit, well, you choose the word bit, and I say, well, there's a bit. And, that's so you pick on a word that represents something which could otherwise go past quite fleetingly, but you're listening for these words that indicate this is something. I'm going as an exception to this state. So you're going for that exception.
Yeah, and the principle that I use on that one is a bit it fits into this model I have, which is the 99% and the 1%. So 100% is congruent, 99% is incongruent. Therefore, most people focus on the 99% and say, well, I do this. I'm very good with this. Everything's great. Yes. Well, and I say, yes, absolutely. In the 99% is great. But this bit that you raise is the 1%. So let's go 100% in the 1%.
Yes.
Get that piece transformed, and then you're congruent. And later in the interaction, we talk about congruence as an indicator of a desired state.
Yes, and that, although it's 1%, it's a very significant 1% to make that step between the 99% and the 100% is actually a paradigm shift.
It is.
Big shift.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that in itself is such a powerful concept, because what you're saying is absolutely right, that final little piece which we all kind of get stuck on is really where change happens, because it locks it in, it kind of anchors that change that we're going for. So
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so shall I go back to the
Well,
recording?
but to say, if we talk about the topic, as it turns out, that it was an open-ended question. And what that means is it gave you freedom to go wherever the energy was inside, internally. And as it turned out, that had to do with age
Yes.
as the topic.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, we can explore this further, but the 99% example is how physically fit you are and
Yeah.
how you were using that to cover the 1%. And as we go further, we can see some details on that. But just to mark that out.
So that's
And that,
interesting to listen and to look for the cover that somebody has, which is
yeah,
like how they qualify their way of being and how
right.
they avoid the looking at the crunch bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, one other thing I would just say, and again, it's just a key distinction in NLP is about timeframes. And you make a really good and clear distinction about when you're present is a different state than when you go future.
Yes.
And that when you get into your 1%, you've gone into your future.
Yes.
And so the physically fit piece is very much about being present. And that's part of the cover you were talking about.
Yeah, so I have that ability to distinguish between the different states when I consider them, like what the different filters are for those states, but hadn't actually gone into it and explored it.
Right. Yeah. That's great.
Okay.
As an experiment, can you go into your future with those concerns, with the reality of your physical, mental, not emotional, but physical and mental decline, where you literally have declined, because this will happen, and be present to it without any judgment on yourself?
This bit of me goes, I won't decline.
Exactly, that's called denial.
They're in denial.
No, and just that bit.
Yeah.
Okay, let's put a pause there.
Yeah. Hang on.
This is
Hold on
what
1 second. I might
how
not
to deal with this bit.
Sorry, I might not have paused that. Right, I didn't pause the video. That's why. Right. Yep. I think there's also that humor that we have, that we have a shortcut to things.
Right.
That you think, oh, really, there's no point trying to wriggle out of this because you're going to get me, basically. I'm going to get myself, but you're going to hold that space for me to get myself. So, and it's interesting because I was talking about this with a group today and I was saying, there's still this bit of me that kind of creatively seeks to avoid, and yet you think this is futile. So the time of that avoidance has become shorter over the years.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing about the humor. It's like, oh, I've been caught. It's just like, yes. And the thing about that to be, as a coach, to be able to be lighthearted about it, it releases a sense of judgment and creates safety. And I think for
Yes.
people to work with, it's like saying there's no judgment here. And so there's this, oh, okay, I can go into that.
Yes. And it is in that sense provocative, in that you're not using the words, you're putting a judgment on it in a sense, but in this kind of light. It's like speaking the truth, but speaking it, something that, you speak the truth, say it quickly and with humor, otherwise they'll kill you.
Don't make me look at this reality here.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a very key piece, isn't it? Because I think sometimes some coaches would seek to reassure people,
Yeah, right.
and it's
Yeah.
not about that. It's about go and let's play the devil's advocate and take this to its conclusion.
I think it's also could be just interesting to, you know, that question that I asked that started this section, um, as an experiment, go into your future, which actually the way you it's a bit of a unusual thing. Your present state is you representing your future, right? And that's a problem state or a stuck state, right? Because you go into your future, you dissociate. And
Yes.
so I say, enter into that future with
Yes.
that concern and the reality of that mental and physical decline, which is what you're avoiding, right? Because that's a reality. So as you enter into that, you're actually transforming your present state.
Yes. And that's a key piece, that associate into, not just thinking about hypothetically, but
That's right.
into it.
And it has to do with, for us as coaches, it has to do with understanding the structure of the present state and the desired state. And so when we can bring desired state into our present state, that becomes transformative. And that's what you did here.
Yeah.
Because we're already saying yes to it in your response.
Well, that's a learned response with you.
All right.
I mean, there's no point saying no. And there's no point saying no. I mean, what I do with everything is ultimately my choice. But I'd be denying what you're giving me if I were to defend against that or say no to that. So
I think that's a really important point for us as, we want to grow. I mean, if we're NLPers, we want others to grow, but we also want ourselves to grow. And I think to be able to be in the position where going, okay, what is it that I can and need to take from this interaction that will help me to grow? And saying yes to that, as opposed to, okay, I can feel myself defending, but I'm going to say yes anyway. I think that's a skill. That's an NLP skill.
Or to defend and give reasons for not doing it is it's a waste of time. It's wasting the resource that's available in the present. It's like the only way that I or anybody is going to learn about the impact of, in this case, what you're offering, is to take it on board and associate into it.
Right.
I can't do it intellectually.
That's right. That's right. Okay, that's good.
Let's go again.
Let's go again.
Like
it's a combination of wanting to do
right.
that.
Yeah.
And how the wanting to is the biggest stumbling block. I suppose the question is, who am I? Who am I if I'm in decline?
Right. And I can just, the short path here is I can tell you, you are on the verge of having a revelation that who you are is not your body.
Yes, because I recognize,
with that revelation, it is possible, it's totally possible and real to imagine in your future the decline, and that's not who you are. That's not your essence.
Yes, I have a glimpse of that now. Yes. I think I've had moments of being really the sense of that recently when I've been in conversation with people. I thought, my way of being is very different to that.
Right. Okay. What's that?
I mean, we could talk about it with it actually on the screen like this. just to say, like, at those points, I was really going inside to imagine, to associate into, this state. And there was a kind of battle going on inside me. I was like, still that resistance to accepting, decline.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of I'll stop the sharing anyway. It was a real kind of tussle going on in those moments.
Mm-hmm. So, it's a profound thing that you got to in that very short moment there, where you said, the question is, who am I? Who am I if I decline? I mean, that's like light bulbs going off for me. And that's what led me to say, I think you're on the verge of having revelation, that who you are
Yes.
is
Which
not
was
your
also
body.
an interesting point, because like you're putting your interpretation on in a very profound way there. So, I mean, we often talk about non-directional coaching and just letting the person discover, but there's times when, what I've learned with you is you come in with a very profound statement of purpose or identity, for example, which may not be in, like in this case, they were not words in my thinking in that moment.
Yeah, and that, frankly, that is, I think, one of the things that is different about my style than many others is that I do believe that, for example, in this case, we would not gotten where we got if I had not made that.
No, and I can think of other times. Yeah, I can think of other times when you've said things like that, and they're memorable. You've put a kind of, I was going to say like a spin. It's much more than that, but you've put this frame on it, which has
Right.
changed. Which I suppose, I could still go, no, not that at all. But I think because we know each other very well as well, that, what you say to me, I'm open to accepting.
Right. Yeah, there's a particular, there are different forms of making meaning. And I see this as one of those forms of making meaning for another person who they're not likely to make meaning in this way because it's not in their map of the world. And if they reject it or decline it, I'm fine with that. I'll calibrate and I'll move on.
Yes.
But oftentimes, this gets down to understanding the structure of, you go, the question is, who am I? Especially, if I'm in decline, if I'm that thing I've been avoiding, who am I? Right. And that is the opening door to make a distinction which you had not yet made, I think, and that is the distinction between your body and your spirit. Yeah. And that your essence, and there's a presupposition in that, but your essence, however you want to describe that, is not your physical body.
Yeah, that was the key thing. I think that was the key thing.
Yeah.
That it's that distinction. And what happened subsequently, which may come out in conversation, was then maybe I'd started it then. I started to look for examples.
Right.
Of people. Yep. Whom I experienced that. So it kind of doing this kind of rapid modeling of others.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's immediately where you went, which it's actually another NLP skill, just to point out, is that because you've developed over all these years, your NLP, you're able to do that very rapid internal search, and you know where to go with it. To go to find examples of how that's true. That's one step in the sequence. The next step is you find those people and then you identify with them. In other words, say, how is what I see in them true of me? And that's where we go later on in this session.
I think there's something else there as well. Yes, it's just that's stating things to somebody, offering them a redefinition of themselves is key. And And I know that when you do that, so yes, the other thing I was going to say about that is that it's a very you're expressing something that is about that person's potential best self.
Right.
You know, it's not like, oh, there's this, it's never a problem state. It's
Right.
a profound extension of
Right.
what's possible for who they are. That's
Right.
key. So you're actually offering them this best self
Right.
description in a
Right.
way, and you do it, um, you know, the way you do it is so important because you are seeing and hearing that, presumably. I mean, as you say it, you totally,
Yeah.
you know, so it's not just a, oh, maybe it's this. There's no doubt about that
Okay about it. No, no. You know, when I get in that state, when I make a comment like that, it is definitive.
Yes,
You know,
that's
yeah,
very
that's
important to have that confidence, to that certainty, to
yeah.
say something like that so in such a definitive way.
Right.
That's really that's a huge difference.
And you know, that's one of the things that I would say about NLP coaches who have matured to a certain level, is that we have authority out of our own lived experience of modeling others and integrating it for ourselves. So for me to be able to say something with that kind of authority is an evidence to me that I've modeled that and integrated it. So
Yes,
it's something that is real and living in me. And I'm so that's the basis on which I would say I know that this is true.
yes.
You know, I can challenge that, but you know, my experience is that when I get into that state, it is true.
And that's a very, very significant piece for the way you coach, is you say certain things with such certainty.
Yeah,
So it offers that place of certainty to the person that you're
yeah.
speaking.
And I think it also speaks to the again, this is in some ways the intangible. It's not a technique. It's a way of being, and that how we as coaches we bring who we are to the interaction. And that is as important, if not more so, than the techniques, the modeling, the all the technology of NLP.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, let's go back to the recording.
Yeah.
And I invest a lot in my body, in my fitness.
Right. I would suggest that the presupposition underlying your fitness today is that you are not going to decline because of that investment. And the reality is you are. And the other reality is that's not the essence of your body, is not the essence of who you are.
No. Can I have slow cycling as part of my decline? Because I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And there's a structure to that which can be applied to my other aspects of life as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of application, you go into your future, acknowledge the reality of your physical decline, and love being yourself there.
Not there.
You're close.
Oh God, this is like that morning that took a few hours. Oh God. How do I close the gap?
You close the gap metaphorically by stepping across. there's nothing you can do to close it. You just step across.
Okay, let's pause there.